Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to kick off today's presentation on data handling. Today's focus is on understanding how we manage and process data effectively. We'll cover key concepts, best practices, and practical applications. So, let's dive in and explore this important topic together. Welcome to our contents overview. Today, we'll explore various aspects of data and how we can interpret it effectively. First, we'll start with an introduction to data itself, understanding what it really is. Then, we'll dive into what data handling involves and why it's important. Moving forward, we'll look at different ways to visualize data, such as pictographs, bar graphs, and pie charts. We'll also explore tools like tally charts and learn about different types of bar graphs. As we progress, we'll cover key statistical concepts like mean, median, mode, and range, which help us analyze data more deeply. Finally, we'll have a Q&A session to clarify any questions you might have. This overview sets the stage for a comprehensive understanding of data and its presentation, which is essential in many fields. Let's get started. Let's talk about data. Data is essentially the collection of information gathered for a specific purpose. For example, imagine you want to know how well the students in Class 7 are performing in mathematics. You might collect their marks out of 40. That collection of marks is data. Similarly, you could collect the heights or weights of students in the same class. These are all examples of data because they are pieces of information gathered to help us understand or analyze something. Understanding what data is and how to collect it is fundamental because it forms the basis of all data analysis, which is a key part of making informed decisions. So, in essence, data helps us turn raw information into meaningful insights. Let's talk about what data handling actually is. Data handling refers to the way we can represent data visually, often through pictures or charts, to make it easier to understand. When data is presented graphically, it becomes much simpler to interpret and analyze. Think about how a bar graph or pictograph can quickly show us patterns or differences that might be hard to see in raw numbers. This process includes various tools like bar graphs, pictographs, and tally marks. Each of these helps us organize and display data in a way that's clear and accessible. When we handle data visually, it connects directly to our goal of making information more understandable and useful, whether we're studying, making decisions, or presenting findings. So, mastering data handling is really about transforming raw data into meaningful, visual stories that everyone can grasp easily. So, what exactly is a bar graph? Well, a bar graph is a visual way of representing data that makes it easier to understand at a glance. The bars in the graph are all of the same width, which helps keep things neat and consistent. You can draw these bars either horizontally or vertically, depending on what fits best for the data you're presenting. One of the key points to remember is that the spacing between the bars is also equal, which keeps the graph clear and easy to interpret. Now, the length of each individual bar actually represents a specific number or frequency. So longer bars mean higher values, and shorter bars indicate lower ones. This visual approach helps you quickly grasp the differences and patterns in the data without having to sift through numbers. As we continue through this presentation, keep in mind that bar graphs are a fundamental tool for data visualization, making complex information much more accessible and engaging. Now, let's talk about what a pie chart is. Sometimes, you'll hear them called circle graphs. These are helpful tools because they show the relationship between a whole and its parts. Imagine taking a whole circle and dividing it into different sections or sectors. Each of these sectors represents a part of the whole. The key idea here is that the size of each sector is proportional to the activity or information it stands for. So, if one part makes up half of the total, its sector will be half of the circle. This visual approach makes it easier to see how different parts compare to the entire picture. Pie charts are especially useful when you want to quickly understand the relative sizes of different categories within a whole, connecting back to our overall theme of understanding data visually. So let's talk about what a pictograph actually is. A pictograph is a way of representing information using pictures. Instead of just numbers or words, we use images to make the data more visual and easier to understand. The key idea here is that pictographs use the size or the number of repetitions of the same icon, picture, or symbol to show comparisons. For example, if one group has more icons than another, It indicates a larger quantity. You might also hear it called by other names like pictogram, pictorial chart, pictorial graph, or picture graph. All these terms basically refer to the same concept. Understanding pictographs is important because they help us quickly grasp information and compare different data points visually, which is a central theme in our discussion on how to represent data effectively. Let's talk about what a tally chart is. A tally chart is a simple way to count how often different categories or classifications appear in a set of data. It helps us organize and visualize the counts easily. When we make a tally chart, we use marks, these little lines, to record each observation. Every time we see an item, we add a line. To make counting faster, every fifth observation is marked with a diagonal line crossing the previous 4 lines, creating what we call a 5-barred gate. This makes it quick to see at a glance how many items we've counted in each category. Tally charts are especially useful when we're dealing with grouped observations, meaning data that falls into different groups or categories. Overall, they're a simple, effective way to keep track of frequencies and organize our data clearly. Now, let's explore the different types of bar graphs that you might encounter. First up is the vertical bar graph, which is perhaps the most common. It displays data with vertical bars, making it easy to compare different categories at a glance. Next, we have the horizontal bar graph, where the bars run horizontally. This format is particularly useful when category names are long or when you want to emphasize the differences more clearly. Moving on, there's the stacked bar graph, which allows us to see the composition of different segments within each category, all in one bar. It's great for showing how parts contribute to a whole across multiple categories. Finally, we have the double bar graph, which places 2 bars side by side for each category. This is ideal for comparing 2 different data sets directly. Understanding these variations helps us choose the right type of bar graph for the story we want to tell with our data. Let's take a closer look at the concept of range. Range is calculated by subtracting the lowest value from the highest value in a data set. It gives us a quick sense of how spread out the data is. Think of it as a measure of the total span or variability within your data. The higher the range, the more variation there is between the smallest and the largest observations. This makes range a useful, simple summary statistic, especially when you want to understand the overall distribution. Remember, the range is just one way to describe data variability, and it connects to our broader theme of understanding data characteristics. Let's talk about the mean, which is one of the most common measures of central tendency. The mean is calculated by taking the sum of all observations and then dividing that by the number of observations. In simple terms, it's like finding the average. Now, the importance of the mean is that it gives us a single value that represents the data set as a whole. It's especially useful because it balances the data, meaning it lies somewhere between the maximum and minimum observations. This makes it a very intuitive and widely used measure, helping us understand the overall trend or typical value in our data set. As we move forward, keep in mind that the mean is a cornerstone concept because it connects individual data points to the bigger picture. All right, now let's look at some practice questions to reinforce what we've learned. First, find the mean of the first 10 whole numbers. Think about what the whole numbers are, 0 through 9, and then how we find the mean by adding them all up and dividing by 10. This helps us see how the mean is a measure of the average value. Next, we have a set of runs scored by a batsman across 6 innings, 36, 35, 50, 46, 60, and 65. To find the mean here, we add all these scores together and divide by 6, the number of innings. This example shows how the mean gives us a central value, helping us understand a player's typical performance over multiple games. These questions are great because they connect directly to our theme, using the mean to analyze data in everyday situations. Whether it's numbers or sports scores, finding the mean helps us summarize and interpret data more effectively. Let's talk about the median. The median is the middle of the data. It's the value that sits right in the center when you arrange all your data points in order, whether that's from smallest to largest or vice versa. Think of it as the midpoint. If you have an odd number of data points, the median is simply the middle one. If you have an even number, it's the average of the 2 middle values. The key idea here is that the median gives us a sense of the central tendency, especially when the data is skewed or has outliers. It helps us understand what a typical value looks like within the dataset. So, when you're analyzing data and want to find the middle point, finding the median is your go-to method. This concept ties into our overall theme of understanding data distribution and summarizing it effectively. Now, let's talk about the mode, which is another important measure of central tendency. The mode is simply the number that appears most frequently in a data set. It helps us identify the most common value or the most typical observation. What's interesting about the mode is that it can be used with any type of data, nominal, ordinal, or even numerical. It's particularly useful when we want to know what value occurs most often, like the most popular product size or the most common survey response. Remember, unlike the mean or median, the mode doesn't require any calculations. Just identify the most frequent value. Understanding the mode helps us get a quick sense of the most typical or prevalent value in our data, which ties into our overall goal of summarizing and interpreting data effectively. Thank you all for your attention today. Now, before we wrap up, I'd like to open the floor for any questions you might have. This is a great opportunity to clarify any points, share your thoughts, or discuss how these ideas might apply to your specific situations. Remember, asking questions not only helps deepen your understanding, but also enriches the conversation for everyone. So please feel free to ask anything that's on your mind. I'm here to help clarify and expand on the key concepts we've covered. Again, thank you for being such an engaged audience, and I look forward to your questions.